Welcome, and for this year's final episode of Chayyei Sarah, as far as we could go. So here we go with sharing the screen, and we'll continue with our bracha. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're in the midst of Eliezer recounting the circumstances that brought him to this point where he's now sitting in the home of Betuel, and Lavan and Rivka are all there, and the other people who are not mentioned by name, and they're presenting him with food, and he's refusing to eat until he shares his mission. So, let's see. This is actually, Eliezer's quoting Abraham's words to him as he sets him out on his mission. Vayomer Eli, and let me make sure. Okay. I'm sorry. Eliezer is saying what Abraham said to him. And he said to me, Adonai asher alachti lefanav. Remember, just to bring this into context, right? What preceded this immediately is Eliezer was saying to him, well, maybe this isn't going to work. You're sending me on this mission, but what happens if it doesn't work? And these words of Abraham are really quite amazing. And if you think about them, and if we're capable of applying them. So he says, Adonai asher hitalachti lefanav, the Lord before whom I walked. Yishlach melacho itach, he will send his angel with you, v'hitzliach darkecha, and make sure that your way is successful. V'lakachta isha livni, and you will take a woman for my son, minishpachti, from my family, umi beit avi, and from my father's household.
No Rashi till 43, 42, but I forgot, did we say the bracha?
We did. We did.
Okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, I've tried to be very mindful about doing
I
that.
must have been distracted.
It happens.
Okay.
It happens. Okay, thank you though, Lauren. I appreciate your giving me the heads up on that. Az tinake me'alati, and then you will be clear of this Allah, and Allah is actually a curse from my curse. Remember, he was saying to him, you must do this, and you must swear to me that you're going to do this. So the implication being that if he doesn't fulfill his words, he will be under a curse. Ki tavo el mishpachtui. Okay, there we got this word ki, remember, which has several translations. Okay, so we could translate it as for you will come to my family, but it could also mean if, right? Okay, so it could actually mean if you come to my family.
And here it says when.
Okay, that could mean when as well, right? That's true. Ve'im lo yitnu lach, and if they do not allow you, and literally it means give to you, right? But we could understand it also if they don't allow you. V'hayita naki me'elati, you will then be clear from my curse.
And my translation says if they do not give her to you, the her parenthetical.
Yes, but they don't say her in the Hebrew, right?
That's why it's
Yeah.
parenthetical,
So
yeah.
yeah, so it would, if it were her for sure, it would say yitnu ha lach, okay? But because lo yitnu could also mean they won't give you, and it could be permission, okay? So all right. I mean, I'm not trying to say that only one way is an understanding. It basically means the same thing, okay? Va'avo hayom, and now Eliezer is telling them, and I came today, El Ha'ayin, to the well, Va'omar, and I said, and again, thought, right? Adonai Elohe Adoni Avraham, evocative, right? O Lord, the God of my master Abraham. Im yesh, and notice how he's addressing God, right? Through Abraham, essentially. Im yeshcha na matzliach darki, if it is your will to cause my way to succeed, asher anochi holech alecha, on which, in other words, my way in which I am going, right? The path on which I am going. Hine anochi nitzav al ein hamayim. See, I am here by the side, next to the well of water. V'haya, and it shall be, ha'alma hayotzet lish'ov, if the young woman who comes out to draw water. Okay. Va'amarti elaha, and I say to her, hashkini na ma'at mayim mikadech, please, give me a little water from your pitcher to drink. Are we on? We don't have any Rashi until mid.
There's Rashi on 42.
Right, so let's go there. Let's go back to 42. Va'avo hayom. So, and I came today. Hayom yatzati. So he's saying, because hayom, remember, definite article means it must be referring to something already understood. So he says, hayom yatzati, today I left. V'hayom bati, and today I arrived. Mikan, and from this we can infer, shekafza lo haaretz. That they use an expression in Hebrew. Literally, it means that the land jumped for him. Sometimes they talk about that the land folded up to make it less time. But it's the way they're expressing how quickly he got from point A to point B, and obviously from I'm not sure if he's in Beersheba. From Beersheba to Haran is more than a day's journey, and he's saying that basically, he had literally God's speed. Amar Rabbi Acha. This is a lovely statement by Rabbi Acha. Yafeh sichatan shel avdei avot, that the conversation, right, the casual conversation of the servants of our patriarchs is lovely. Yafeh is lovely. Lifnei hamakom is, so actually he's making a comparison, is lovelier before the Holy One, before God. Me toratan shel banim, from the Torah of their children. Shaharei, so he's doing an analysis now, right? He's looking at this conversation, right, and the degree of circumlocution involved in narrating the story of Eliezer and how we're repeating all his words, right? And he says that is more beautiful. And why? Shaharei Parsha Shel Eliezer, because we look at this chapter about Eliezer, Kfula b'Torah. It's repeated in the Torah, right? We read about it, and now we're reading about his narration concerning it. V'harbe gufei Torah, and there are many principles of Torah. Lo nitna ela beremizah, were only given with an allusion, with a hint. So, I think that's certainly something to think about, right? In terms of, what value is really Rabbi Acha trying to share with us? Is that possibly, I am saying possibly, that our casual conversations, if they are said with a degree of holiness, right, in the same kind of way that Eliezer is speaking, may actually have a greater influence positively in terms of bringing the divine into the world, which is what the Torah essentially allows us to do, right? The Torah is our guide by which we can bring the divine presence into this world. And possibly Rabbi Acha is saying that this particular kind of casual conversation may actually be more effective to more people than, in fact, declarative statements of Torah. And again, it's a way of, I think, of trying to help us become conscious of how we infuse holiness into our lives, and that we can't compartmentalize, right? We tend to compartmentalize what we do in the synagogue or what we do in the study, in the yeshiva, as opposed to when we go home or when we're out and about or when we're going shopping or anything like that. And I think this is a really powerful statement in terms of how we should not compartmentalize And I love quoting what I heard was this African American preacher's statement at the end of services. I've said it many times because I think there's so much truth. And at the end of services, he would say to his congregation, prayers are ending, service is beginning. So just as you can imagine, I think this is just such a great quote. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad we were able to cover that. All right. So we got to continuing. This is his prayer to God, right? Eliezer's prayer to God that he's saying. V'amra Eli, and if she says to me, Gam atashte, indeed you drink, v'gam ligmalecha eshav, and I will also draw water for your camels. Hi haisha, that is the woman. Asher hochiach Hashem, that the Lord decreed levin Adoni, for the son of my master. So let's see what it says. Okay, right. So he says this gam, right? Eli gam ata, you too. So who's the two? Rashi explains, T-O-O, right? Gam larabot anashim she'imor. This word gam is to include the men who were with him. So again, we realize, as we had discussed before, there were men with Eliezer coming. Now, should also mention to you that in Torah analysis, especially when it comes to halachic analysis, which of course is very specific, right? I think part of the unique quality, or one of the unique qualities of Judaism, is the idea that God can be very specific, that we can use our intelligence, that God gave us sufficient intelligence to be able to use that intelligence to draw out specific, very specific and detailed ways of performing divine will. So you have to start off with this principle of loving God, right? Loving God, and part of understanding that loving God means wanting to do what God wants. That when you love someone, that's an underlying expression of love. That when you love someone, you want to make them happy. It gives you more joy in some ways to see them happy, and it makes you sadder than they are when they are sad. That's what love involves. Yeah.
Rabbi, I understand why you're saying this. I mean, what you're saying, but are you saying the why of why you're saying this? Is it because you're saying if Rebecca is offering water for the camels and the men and everything, that she's doing that out of love?
I think in this no, that really wasn't where I was going. What I was really zeroing in on is this degree of deconstruction, and conscious deconstruction, which prompts the whole halachic process. What I'm trying to and the understanding and the relationship to the Bible and to the Torah, that this is the way in which we are able to use the Torah as a guide in which to satisfy divine will. That in fact, consciously, we recognize that our whole purpose and our ultimate purpose in life is to satisfy divine will. Now, where you're coming from in terms of introducing Rebecca, this was not my intention, but I will try.
Yeah, I was just not clear, but now I understand, because you've said many times God is in the detail.
Yes. Well, I obviously didn't come up with that. Yes.
No, you didn't, but it's a good one, because it counters the saying devil is in the detail, but God and the very details are about paying attention to the details, are about the love.
Right, exactly. Understanding that. Okay, I mean, this is something that I think is so misunderstood in our present society, that there's not the awareness of what really love is about. Okay, I'm not saying it's only about this, but I would say it's an essential part of this. That if you can't say to somebody, I love you, but then you never want to do something to please them. It just doesn't work, okay? And so there are ways in which one has to demonstrate that love, right? Show me state. At any rate, yeah. But as far as Rebecca is concerned, it's not that if this is an indication of love, it would be sort of a love of humanity, the willingness on her part to show kindness to strangers, and seeing that as something that, whether she was conscious of doing it in terms of fulfilling divine will, that is not the issue here. What the issue, at least in terms of where Rebecca is, okay, and maybe she did, and maybe that's why indeed she takes Sarah's place after Sarah passes on. But I'm saying for us as Jews to be conscious that this is an essential part of what it means to be Jewish. And so when you observe mitzvot are exactly the way in which supposedly we are trying to satisfy the divine will, which goes beyond a simple understanding to saying, in some ways, it's our response to the universe. That is, that we as individuals are given this opportunity to try to align our lives with what's going on in the very nature of the universe. And that the Torah gives us that opportunity. But again, if you don't see your own purpose as that, if you don't understand that this is what gives meaning to your life, then of course there's no reason for you to look at the Torah or even necessarily contemplate such things. I mean, yeah, we're a unique religion, we're a specific religion, and I would not say that we're the only religion that understands this principle. But I would say that the degree to which we obsess over the details of divine will is actually an expression of how much we're supposed to love and fear God. So let me make sure I get this sentence done before we finish. Okay, so this is hochiach. So generally, the word lahochiach means to give proof, evidence, something like that, right? So Rashi explains, because it is a sort of an interesting usage, and translating it isn't, okay, I said, but compare Rashi, right? So the translation, I think, in Sefaria, the person who translated it there said decreed. And it's not that it's wrong, it's just, here we go. Let's try this out. Okay, so be rare. Be rare means to choose. Okay, sometimes it means to clarify, but very often when a choice is made, it clarifies what the decision is. V'hodia, and made known, right? So you have clarified and made known who the woman is to be. V'chein kol hochacha b'shebamikra. And he says, anytime you come across this expression of hochacha, shebamikra, that is in Scripture, birur davar. It is the choice of a specific matter or a clarification of a matter. So this is, again, I mean, I love the way Rashi, explains things and tries himself to clarify for us what's going on here. It's such a gift. Onwards. Ani, so he goes on. Ani terem achalel ledaber. So now he's sharing his reaction, right? After he says this he's still, Rebecca hasn't shown up yet, right? He's just finished asking God for this particular blessing. Ani, as for me, terem achalel ledaber. As soon as I finished speaking, or I think I'd even go so far as to say I had barely finished speaking, right? That's that sense of terem. I finished speaking. El libi, to myself. Vehine, and look, Rivka yotzeit. Rivka comes out, or came out. Vechada al shichma, with her pitcher on her shoulder. Vaterid ha'aina vatishav, and she went down into the well to draw water. Va'omar eleha, and I said to her, hashkinina. Please give me to drink. Let's see, Rashi. Yeah. So Rashi is going to give us a little bit of a grammatical analysis here. Terem achale, I had barely finished. Terem sha'ani mechale. So it says, before, before I had even finished, right? Or just as soon as I had finished. But terem does have that sense of even just immediately before, but it's basically contemporaneous. V'chein kol lashon hoveh, and so right, because he's using achale, which is an imperfect verb. It's an imperfect form of the verb, right? So often imperfect, as I said, from a grammatical definition of the word perfect. Perfect means completed action, and imperfect means incomplete action. So it's a way of describing the way a verb is functioning. Yes? I'm sorry, I thought I heard someone say something. Okay. So he's saying mechaleh would be, again, an imperfect form. V'chein kol lashon hoveh. Okay, and with regard to any usage of the language in a present or contemporaneous sense. In other words, it's happening now. It hasn't finished happening, but of course, present is like this moment, right? If you think about what do we mean by the very moment, right? It's always moving into the past, right? It hasn't finished yet, but it's like this continuity, right? So he says, Pa'amim, there are times, shehu medaber belashon avar, there are times when Hebrew uses the perfect tense, right? Avar would be past, right? Uses past tense, the verb in the past, kamo terem kiliti, right? Kiliti means I finished. Notice perfect tense, right? So before I finished. Upa'amim shemedaber belashon atid, but there are also times when it speaks in the future tense, and kamo. So he's explaining the vagaries of Hebrew grammar. Kamo, and he gives an example in Job chapter 1. Ki amar, for he said. The amar would be perfect, right? Amar. And possibly it would mean he would, amar Eov, thus Eov would say, okay, halashon avar. In that case, even though we're talking about his current behavior, it's being referred to in the past tense. And then again, okay, here, kacha ya'aseh Eov, okay? So ya'aseh is imperfect, it's future tense. Hare lashon atid. And so we have an example of the future tense. And I believe this all happens in one sentence, where the verb referring to Job is both put in the past tense form, takes the past tense form, and also the future tense form. Upirush shnehem, but you have to explain both of them, lashon hoveh. They have to do with current contemporaneous action. Ki omer haya Eov, because again, Job, you have to say, because it goes on to say, because Job, omer haya, would say, Job would say, ulai chatu banai, perhaps my children have sinned, vegomer, etc. V'haya osekach, and so he would do constantly. We're talking about a practice that Job had. He used to bring offerings, and he brought them as sin offerings as provisional sin offerings in case his children had sinned. We're trying to describe in chapter 1 of Job just how righteous Job was and to what extent he would go to try and act righteously. Do a little bit more. Let's go on. Okay. So that's verse 47. So let's keep going.
No, we're on verse 46.
We are. I'm going back to it. I know.
Oh,
I just
okay.
was checking. I was just
Oh,
checking where the
when you
next
said, I
Rashi.
get it. When you
Yeah,
said
the next
that, you're
Rashi.
talking
Yeah,
about what you
right.
saw. Okay.
Exactly. Where the next Rashi is. Vatimaher, and she hurried. Remember, we made this point that this word timaher comes up many times, right? About Rebecca and even about Laban. But of course, that alacrity is contingent. What it does is it demonstrates a person's desire, right? But their desire may be appropriate, and their desire may not be so appropriate, as in the case of Laban. But anyway, she hurried. The Torod kadam elaha. She took her pitcher from her. She put it down. Vatomer, and she said, "Stay, drink." Remember, she'd gone into the well. She'd gone to draw the water. She came up, and when he asked her, she immediately gave him the water she had just drawn. Right? Drink. V'gam gamalecha ashke, and your camels too I will give to drink. Va'esht, and I drank. V'gam hagamalim hishkata, I drank, and she gave to the camels as well to drink. Va'eshal ota, and I asked her. Va'omar, said, Bat mi'at, whose daughter are you? Va'tomer, and she said, Bat Betuel ben Nachor, I am the daughter of Betuel, the son of Nachor, Asher Yalda lo Milka, to whom Milka gave birth. So Milka was the mother of Betuel. Va'asim hanezim, and I placed the nose ring al apa, on her nose, va'atzmidim al yadeha, and the bracelets on her arms. So, but notice, if you were paying attention, when we read the story itself, we read, and I think we made a point about it, right? That he first gave her the gifts, and then he asked who she was, right? But here it's reversed, and Rashi picks that up immediately, right? Va'eshal va'asim, and I inquired and I placed. Shina haseder, he changed the order, so he told a little bit of not quite what happened. Why? Shahare hu tchila natan, because in fact, he gave to her first. Va'achar kach sha'al, and then afterwards he asked her. Ela shelo yitpesuhu b'divarav, but he wanted to make sure they wouldn't have said, wait a second. In other words, they should catch him in his words, vayomru, and they would say to him, Hey ach natata la, how is it possible that you gave it? How come you gave her? Va'adain eincha yodea mihi, and yet you didn't know who she was at this point. Right? In other words, I assume that what they're saying is, what made you think, why did you think it was appropriate to give her such precious gifts when you didn't know who she was? But in a sense, right, if we think this through, even though Rashi isn't explaining it, that in a way, remember, he was amazed that the words of his prayer to God were fulfilled at that very moment, and I suspect he was reacting to how amazing it was that this was happening to him. So in a way, he was trusting God, and when he asked Rebecca, it was simply to confirm, right? It was to confirm, not to really inquire, and they would not have understood it that way. So again, there's a bunch of little things that you can try to infer from what's going on here, in that, when you tell someone something, if you're giving them information, you want to make sure the information is obviously as accurate as possible. But if in being so accurate, you're going to raise issues that really are irrelevant because they are not going to understand what you're saying, you need to be able to anticipate how people are going to react to what you're saying, and to make sure that they don't get sidetracked because of how you're saying it. I mean, was he essentially telling them the truth? And the answer is he was. He was essentially telling them the truth, but he changed a detail because it would have sidetracked the conversation. I think, interesting. Onwards. Well, we got, okay, actually, we're going to stop right there because it is a time at this point. Going to put in the little arrow, the big arrow. We'll pop that there. And I'm going to set a bookmark. Let's see if I can do that. And so we'll know where to start with God's help next year. And I'm going to stop the share and stop the recording and thank those and for those who are following us on the recording. Thank you. Please always feel free to comment or to get in touch with me if you have a question.